He was a man who had everything that most people only dream about. Expensive cars, a mansion with golden lights, and a business empire that made him a millionaire before he had even turned 30. Whenever he walked into a room, people stared at him with respect, some with jealousy, and some with greed. His life looked perfect from the outside, but deep inside, he carried a loneliness that no money could ever hide. Every night, when the city lights glowed and his house became silent, he sat alone near the giant window, staring at the stars, asking himself a question he never dared to share: what is missing in my life? The truth was simple. He was tired of fake smiles. He was tired of people who came close to him only because of his money. Friends, business partners, even women, most of them only wanted to take something from him. They praised him, laughed at his jokes, and acted loyal, but he always knew their eyes never looked at him with true care. They only looked at the power behind his name. It was like living in a golden cage. From outside, it shined brightly, but inside, it felt empty and cold. One evening, after a long day of meetings and fake conversations, he drove to a charity gala. The event was full of rich men and women dressed in diamonds and designer suits. Laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. Yet, he felt the same boredom as always. People shook his hand, congratulated him, and pretended to admire his success. But none of it touched his heart. He moved away from the crowd, walking slowly toward the quieter corner of the hall. And that is when he saw her. She was not like the others. She wasn't wearing an expensive gown or heavy jewelry. Instead, she wore a simple dress, and her hair was tied back in a modest style. But there was something about her eyes, something different, something rare. They were filled with kindness, but also with strength, the kind that doesn't come from money but from real struggles in life. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't even looking around for attention. She was busy helping some children from the charity, making sure they were comfortable and smiling. For the first time in years, his heart skipped a beat. He didn't even realize he was staring until she noticed him. Their eyes met for just a second, and she quickly looked away, focusing again on the children. That moment felt like a small spark of life inside his lonely heart. He wondered who she was and why she seemed so different from everyone else in that crowded hall. He wanted to approach her, but something inside held him back. Maybe it was fear. Fear that she would also see him only as a rich man, nothing more. Still, he couldn't stop himself. He walked toward her with a polite smile. "Good evening," he said softly. She looked up at him, surprised. "Hello," she replied, her voice calm and steady. Unlike others, she didn't rush to compliment him, didn't act impressed by his presence. She treated him like an ordinary man. That shocked him. Almost everyone he met either tried too hard to please him or to use him. But she was different. "What's your name?" he asked. "Aisha," she answered simply. Then she looked back at the children and continued helping them with their food. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say next. He had spoken to countless women before, women who dreamed of luxury and power, but never had he felt this nervous. It was strange. The millionaire who could close million-dollar deals with confidence was now struggling for words in front of a simple girl. Finally, he asked, "Do you often come to these charity events?" She gave a small smile. "Yes. I work here as a volunteer. It's not about the party, it's about helping the kids." Her words hit him deeply. For everyone else in the room, the charity was just an excuse to show off wealth and status. But for her, it was about something real. He found himself admiring her more with every second. He wanted to talk longer, to know more about her, but before he could, someone called her name. She excused herself politely and walked away. He watched her leave, feeling something inside him that he hadn't felt in years: hope. That night, when he returned home, he didn't think about business deals or profits. He didn't think about luxury cars or new investments. His mind was filled only with the image of Aisha's honest smile and her kind eyes. For the first time in a long while, he lay awake not because of loneliness, but because of a strange excitement. He didn't know why, but he felt that meeting her was not just a coincidence. It was the beginning of something his heart had been waiting for. Something money could never buy. And deep inside, he made a silent promise to himself. He would see her again. The next morning, when the sun painted the city golden, he woke up with a strange feeling. For years, he had woken up thinking about meetings, profits, and deadlines. But today was different. His mind kept going back to that charity event and the girl with the honest smile. Aisha. Her name alone felt warm, like a secret melody echoing in his heart. He wondered why just one short meeting had left such a strong impact. At the office, his employees noticed his unusual silence. Normally, he was sharp and quick, but today he stared at his phone many times as if waiting for a message that would never come. He thought about searching her online but stopped himself. He didn't want to see her as just another name in his rich world. He wanted to meet her naturally, like before. That evening, he found himself driving back to the charity center. He told himself it was for a donation, but deep down, he knew the truth. He just wanted to see her again. The charity building wasn't fancy. Its walls were old, the paint slightly faded. Children's laughter filled the small halls, making it brighter than any mansion. And there she was. Aisha stood near a group of kids, helping them with their homework. Her hair was tied loosely this time, a few strands falling on her face as she bent to explain something. She didn't even notice him at first, and strangely, he liked that. When she finally looked up, her eyes widened a little in surprise. "You again?" she asked, her tone not rude, but not excited either. "Yes," he said, trying to sound casual. "I thought I'd stop by. Maybe I can help." She raised her eyebrows. "Help? You don't look like the type who knows how to sit on the floor with kids and do math problems." He chuckled nervously. "Maybe not. But I can try." To his own surprise, he sat with the children and began listening to their questions. His expensive suit looked out of place on the small wooden floor, but the kids laughed with him, and he found himself laughing too. It felt real. No fake handshakes, no business talk, no competition. Just simple joy. Aisha watched him quietly. She still wasn't impressed by his presence, but she couldn't deny that he was trying. Most rich men only came to donate money and leave with photographs for their reputation. But this man. He was sitting on the floor, struggling with a math problem, sweating a little under the pressure of children's innocent eyes. She almost smiled. When the kids ran outside to play, she finally spoke. "Why are you here? Honestly." He paused. The truth was on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say it. He couldn't tell her that since the moment he met her, he hadn't been able to think of anything else. So instead, he said softly, "Because sometimes money isn't enough. Sometimes, being with people like this makes life feel alive." Her expression softened a little, but her eyes still carried caution. "Most people don't believe that," she replied. "Maybe most people haven't lived in my world," he whispered, but she didn't hear it. Over the next few days, he returned again and again. Sometimes with small gifts for the kids, sometimes just to sit and listen to their stories. Aisha began to notice something unusual about him. Unlike others, he didn't talk about himself. He never mentioned his company, his cars, or his mansion. He asked about her instead, her dreams, her struggles, her reasons for volunteering. She told him how her father had passed away early, leaving her and her mother to survive with little money. She told him how she worked part-time jobs while studying, and how helping others gave her a purpose. "You're strong," he said one evening as they walked out of the center. "You don't live for yourself alone." She looked at him carefully. "Strength comes when you don't have another choice," she replied. Her words hit him hard. He had money to solve every problem, but she had only her will. Yet, she stood taller than anyone he knew. The bond between them grew quietly. She began to smile more in his presence, though she still didn't know who he really was. For her, he was just a simple man who cared about the children and listened to her without judgment. For him, she was the first person who looked at him not as a millionaire, but as a human being. But late at night, fear still kept him awake. What if she discovered his real identity? What if she found out that the man sitting on the floor with children was the same man who appeared in magazines and business news? Would she walk away like everyone else? One evening, as they sat in the park near the charity center, she turned to him suddenly. "You're hiding something," she said. His heart stopped for a second. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. "You never talk about yourself," she explained. "Most men I know talk about their jobs, their money, their dreams. But you avoid all that. Who are you really? He looked at her, the streetlights glowing softly around them, her face waiting for an answer. His lips parted, but no words came out. He wanted to tell her everything, yet fear chained his tongue. So he smiled weakly and said, "Maybe someday, you'll know." She stared at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. But in her eyes, a silent question remained. And in his heart, a storm of emotions began to rise. Because he knew that someday was coming sooner than he thought. The days slowly turned into weeks, and their meetings became almost a routine. Whenever he walked into the charity center, the children ran toward him with laughter. He would sit on the floor, play games, and sometimes even tell stories that made them giggle. Aisha watched all this with quiet surprise. She had seen many people come and go, but most of them stayed only for photographs or short visits. He was different. He stayed. He listened. He cared. But still, a question remained in her mind. Who exactly was he? She couldn't understand why a man like him, who dressed well and spoke with such confidence, spent so much time here. He avoided questions about his personal life and never spoke about his work. Yet, every time he looked at her, his eyes carried a sincerity that she couldn't ignore. One evening, after the children left, they sat outside on the charity steps. The sky was painted in orange and purple, the sun slowly hiding behind the tall buildings. The air was calm, but his heart was restless. "You know," she said softly, "I used to believe that people with money never cared about others. They only lived for themselves." He looked at her, his eyes fixed on hers. "And now?" he asked carefully. "Now," she paused, thinking. "Now I'm not so sure. Maybe I was wrong." Her words warmed him, but at the same time, they cut deep. Because she still didn't know who he really was. She thought he was a simple man, maybe middle class, maybe struggling like her. But the truth was far from it. The truth was a secret that could break everything. He wanted to tell her. Many times, the words almost escaped his lips. But then he imagined her reaction, the shock in her eyes, the distance she might create, the trust that could shatter. And every time, fear silenced him. As days passed, their bond grew stronger. They began to share more personal stories. She told him about her childhood, how her father worked hard as a taxi driver before he passed away, leaving her and her mother with very little. She shared how she once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but life forced her into small jobs to support her family. He listened carefully, feeling her pain as if it were his own. "You deserve so much better," he said one night. She shook her head with a small smile. "Happiness is not always about what you have. It's about what you give. These kids, they make me feel alive." Her words stayed in his mind like an echo. For him, happiness had always been tied to success, numbers, and deals. But she was showing him another meaning, one he had never understood before. Slowly, he began to change. At the office, his employees noticed he was calmer, kinder. He no longer rushed out of meetings to attend parties. Instead, he rushed to the charity center. His business partners noticed he smiled more often, though no one knew the real reason. But the secret was still there. And secrets have a way of growing heavier with time. One Friday evening, Aisha invited him to join her for tea at a small roadside stall near her home. It was nothing fancy, just a wooden table, plastic chairs, and a man serving hot tea in glass cups. But to him, it felt more special than any five-star dinner he had ever attended. As they sipped tea, she laughed softly. "You look funny, you know. Sitting here in your fancy clothes, drinking tea from a glass cup. People are staring." He looked around and smiled. "Maybe I like it. Maybe I needed this more than I knew." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, silence surrounded them. Then she asked the question again, this time more directly. "Tell me something about yourself. What do you really do?" His chest tightened. The question he had been avoiding for weeks had finally cornered him. He searched her eyes, trying to find safety there, but all he saw was curiosity. She wasn't asking for gossip or money. She just wanted honesty. He opened his mouth to answer, but once again, fear won. I do some business. Nothing big." She frowned slightly, sensing the hesitation in his voice, but chose not to push further. Still, the doubt remained in her mind. That night, as he lay in his massive bedroom, surrounded by silence and shadows, he felt torn apart. He had never been this close to someone before, never shared such pure moments. And yet, the wall of lies stood between them. In his heart, he knew one thing clearly. If he wanted her to truly trust him, he couldn't keep this hidden forever. But he also knew, the moment she found out the truth, he might lose her. And fate was already moving in a direction he could not control. Because outside, in the real world, his face was everywhere, on billboards, in magazines, on TV screens. And sooner or later, Aisha was going to see him not as the simple man who drank tea with her, but as the millionaire everyone admired and feared. The truth has a strange way of coming out, even when someone tries their best to hide it. For weeks, he managed to keep his identity a secret. He lived two lives, one as the powerful millionaire the world admired, and one as the simple man who spent evenings with Aisha. But no lie can last forever. It happened on an ordinary morning. Aisha was walking back from the market, holding a bag of groceries. At the corner of the street, she saw a newspaper stand. Normally, she didn't stop to look, but something caught her eye. There, on the front page of a business magazine, was his face. His name printed in bold letters. The headline read, "Young Millionaire Expanding His Empire Worldwide." Her heart froze. The man smiling from the glossy cover was the same man who had sat with her on the roadside, drinking tea and laughing like he owned nothing. For a long moment, she stood still, unable to breathe. When she finally reached home, she dropped the groceries on the table and sat down. Memories rushed through her mind, his silence whenever she asked about his work, his hesitation, the way he avoided questions. Now it all made sense. He hadn't been shy. He had been hiding the truth. By evening, when he came to the charity center, excited to see her, her eyes were cold. She didn't smile. She didn't greet him the way she usually did. Instead, she stood with her arms crossed. "You lied to me," she said quietly. He stopped, his heart sinking. "Aisha, You told me you were just a small businessman. You let me believe you were ordinary. But all this time, you were one of the richest men in this city." Her voice shook with both anger and disappointment. He stepped closer, his hands trembling. "I didn't lie to hurt you. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" she demanded, her eyes filling with tears. "Afraid that if you knew the truth, you would never see me for who I really am. Afraid that you would look at me the same way everyone else does, like a wallet, not a man." Her tears slipped down her cheeks. "Do you know what hurts me more than your secret? It's that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. You said you wanted something real, but real love doesn't start with lies." He wanted to reach for her hand, to beg her to understand, but she pulled back. That night, as she walked away from him, he felt a pain stronger than anything he had ever known. All the wealth he had collected, all the empires he had built, meant nothing in front of the emptiness in his chest. For the first time, he felt powerless. Money could buy houses, cars, and even respect, but it could never buy trust. The following days were unbearable. He tried calling her, but she didn't answer. He sent flowers, but they returned with the delivery man. He waited outside the charity center, but she refused to meet him. At the office, his employees noticed the change. The sharp, confident man was gone. He sat quietly in meetings, his mind far away. When asked about business strategies, he barely responded. His world, once so controlled, was now falling apart. Meanwhile, Aisha was battling her own storm. Her heart remembered his laughter, his kindness with the children, the way he listened to her. But her mind replayed the betrayal. How could she trust a man who had built their bond on a hidden truth? She told herself to stay away, but every night, when she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about him standing in front of her with guilt in his eyes. One evening, she found herself walking past the big billboard in the city square. His face looked down at her, smiling in a polished suit. For the world, he was a hero, a leader, a symbol of success. For her, he was just a man who had broken her heart. But she also remembered the man who sat on the floor with children, who laughed at his own mistakes, who tried to be humble despite his world of riches. Was he both of those men? Or was he someone in between? Her confusion grew deeper, but her pride kept her from reaching out. She told herself, if he truly loves me, he will prove it. Not with money, not with flowers, but with honesty. And he was already preparing to do just that. Because he knew he couldn't let her go. He couldn't let the only real thing in his life slip away. If it meant losing everything else, he was ready. The man who once believed money could fix any problem was about to risk everything, not for profit, not for power, but for love. And the storm between them was only beginning. The days without her felt endless. His house, though filled with golden lights, looked darker than ever. His office, usually filled with energy, felt like a prison. Every corner reminded him of her laughter, her calm voice, her eyes that had once trusted him. He had never known what emptiness truly meant until she walked away. He tried everything. Messages, flowers, visits. But nothing worked. Aisha's silence cut deeper than any harsh words. For the first time in his life, his power and wealth were useless. He could buy companies, build skyscrapers, and influence leaders, but he could not buy her forgiveness. One evening, heavy rain poured over the city. Streets glistened under the storm, and people rushed to find shelter. But he stood outside Aisha's small home, drenched, his clothes clinging to him. He had been standing there for hours, waiting, hoping. Finally, when the door opened, she appeared, shocked to see him in such a state. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. He looked at her with tired eyes. His voice was low, trembling. "I had to see you. I had to tell you what I couldn't before." She crossed her arms. "You should go home. You don't belong here." But he didn't move. "If I could bet all my money, all my wealth, just to win back your trust, I would risk everything without a second thought," he said. His voice cracked with raw emotion. "Because none of it means anything without you." Her heart softened slightly at his words, but she still fought the storm inside. "Do you think words can fix everything? Trust is not something you buy. You broke it." "I know," he whispered. "And I hate myself for it. But please, look at me. Not as a millionaire, not as the man on magazine covers. Look at me as the man who sat on the floor with those children, who laughed with you over tea, who found life again because of you. That man is real. That man loves you." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to stay strong, but the honesty in his broken voice shook her. She had never seen him like this, stripped of pride, stripped of power, just a man begging for one more chance. "I never wanted your money," she said, her voice trembling. "I only wanted your honesty." "I will give you nothing but honesty from now on," he promised. "If you want me to walk away from all this wealth, I will. If you want me to live simply, I will. Just don't close the door on me. Not forever." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of rain. Aisha searched his eyes, and what she saw there was not the mask of a millionaire. It was the raw truth of a man who had finally realized the value of love. Slowly, she stepped closer. Her hands shook as she touched his arm. "I don't need you to give up your world," she whispered. "I just need to know that in that world, you will never hide from me again." He nodded, his eyes shining with tears. Never again. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to smile, though faintly. In that moment, forgiveness began to bloom. Not because he was rich, not because he stood in the rain for her, but because she finally saw the sincerity he had hidden behind walls of fear. He reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. The storm outside still raged, but inside, something gentle had returned, a fragile but real hope. In the days that followed, he kept his promise. He didn't hide anymore. He introduced her to his world, not as a display, but as his equal. She saw the mansions, the cars, the endless wealth. But more importantly, she saw the man who was ready to put it all aside if it meant keeping her. For Aisha, the journey was not easy. Doubt still tried to enter her heart, but every time it did, he reminded her with actions, not just words, that love was bigger than money. He stayed humble, he stayed honest, and slowly, her walls came down. Months later, at another charity event, the same place where they first met, he stood beside her, not as a millionaire searching for meaning, but as a man who had found his true partner. The hall was once again filled with glittering lights and expensive clothes, But this time, he didn't feel empty. Because at his side stood the woman who had taught him what life was truly worth. And when he looked at her, he knew that love, the one thing money could never buy, had finally become his greatest treasure.